Johannesburg High Court has ruled that Lerato Sengadi is HHP's customary wife.
This is, of course, according to Judge Ratha Mokgoatlheng. The judge, however, denied the interdict to hold the funeral taking place tomorrow.
The applicant, according to the law recognizing traditional customary marriages, and deceased Jabba, complied with the law, and consequently, in my view, a customary union between the applicant and the deceased Jabba was contracted. And I want to request that this concept of Ubuntu must be given traction in this case, that fairness and equity and the balance of convenience dictates that there are other interests which are predicated in this application. The deceased, like me. If I die, I think it's only my family that will turn up. But the deceased was a national figure, and he deserves a decent funeral which has been arranged by the father, who I believe did that, amongst others, out of his good heart. And I would implore the applicant to attend that funeral in the spirit of Ubuntu. As a consequence, using the discretion which I think the court can exercise in this peculiar circumstances attended to this case, the interdict to stop the funeral from taking place is denied.
All right, so our reporter Lopang Alamo's been attending court for us, and she joins us now. Let's cross to her now. Lopang, thanks very much for joining us. It's been a pretty long day, stop and start. The two parties tried to settle out of court and they didn't get to a decision. And in the end, the judge was quite clear about how he saw the case. Take us through.
Well, of course, Peter, that is correct. It's been a very long day here at the Johannesburg South Gauteng Court. Well, a very, very early judgment here by the Judge Ratha Mokgoatlheng, who a lot of people say his judgment was very fair in the fact that Lerato is now legally recognized as the customary wife of the late Jabulani Tsambo, better known as Jabba or HHP. That's one of the things that Lerato was fighting for in her affidavit. Also, another thing that Lerato was fighting for is the fact that most of the belongings, if not all of them, that were taken by the respondent, being Jabba's father, Robert Tsambo, should be returned to Lerato now that the court has declared her as the legal wife of the late hip-hop superstar. Also, another application that Lerato had made was to have the funeral being stopped from taking place tomorrow in Mahikeng at the Mabatu Center. But of course, that did not go in her way, as Judge Ratha Mokgoatlheng continued to reiterate the fact that the spirit of Ubuntu needs to prevail, and the fact that the family has already spent so much money in preparing for the funeral, and also the fact that the provincial government was also involved in ensuring that the funeral takes place tomorrow. So those are the factors that he took into account before he made the judgment that the funeral will not be stopped and that it will go ahead. So I guess the major victor here being Lerato, because during the week, earlier on this week, the family insisted, or rather the father of Jabba insisted, that they do not recognize Lerato as the customary wife of Jabba. But however, all of that has changed since Judge Mokgoatlheng has ruled indeed that Lerato is the legal wife. I guess, of course, of everything that Lerato has ever applied for in her affidavit that we saw surface 2 days ago, is the fact that the funeral will not be stopped. But everything else that she had applied for, in that being her marriage to Jabba being recognized as legal, and also that all the belongings, all the possessions, including but not limited to the hard drives that were taken from their home in Rand Park Ridge, also the property, and also we're talking about the house keys, and the fact that also we heard in court that Jabba's father had changed all the locks in the house. All of that needs to be returned to the applicant being Lerato by the respondent being Jaba's father.
All right, so both sides would have made some arguments before the judge, and perhaps you can take us in the main. What was each side saying? Why was the family not recognizing this marriage? And in the end, what was compelling in favor of Lerato in terms of why she won this case?
Well, very interesting, Peter. Advocate Mahan, who was representing the Tsambo family, well, of course, rather Jaba's father, was arguing the fact that during the process of Lobola, they had not concluded the negotiations. We understand, and it was also said in court, that most of the money was paid. An amount of 45,000 rand was agreed upon by the two families, but then Jaba's family already on the day took out 30,000 rands. Another meeting was then set up to have the rest of the money paid up, but it is said, it was also heard in court earlier on, that the meeting did not take place, so the rest of the negotiations did not take place. So that's what they were arguing. They were also arguing the fact that in a traditional Setswana culture, what usually happens is that the bride has to be taken to the home of the groom to be formally introduced into the family and formally introduced as being the makoti to the groom. But in this case, in Lerato and Jaba's case, that did not take place. We do understand that during the Lobola negotiations, they took place in the house at Lerato's mother's house in Soweto, and that is where the rest of the celebrations took place. So the fact that Lerato rather, the bride, was not taken to the home of Jaba to be formally introduced as the wife of Jaba, that was what the Zambo family, or the father rather, was arguing, the fact that the process was not complete. But also Judge Mokgoatlheng saying that only three things need to be met, only three requirements need to be met if ever they are to deem a customary marriage legal. That being consent, that being the intent also by the family, in written intent, to say that we are actually going to, we saw a lady in your home and we would like to, in writing, that's what happens in Lobola. Most of the people send a letter, and that also is one of the things that needs to be required. So nothing in the act says anything about the bride being taken to the home of the groom to be introduced. So that was where the tricky part came in. But of course, people saying that it is fair, and we also saw Lerato being very emotional as the court said that she is the legal wife of Jaba. She was very emotional because it understandably, it's a very emotionally draining situation to be in, thinking that you're the wife of someone and having the family, or rather the head of the family, deny you as their bride, what we know also in traditional culture as the makoti. So those are some of the things that took place in the court here today.
All right, and I suppose now we just wait and see how it all unfolds. Tomorrow the funeral does take place and she's allowed to attend that. And then I suppose the winding up of the estate, given her new status, will be at question. I just wonder, has there been any reaction from either her supporters or her herself after coming out of this judgment?
We're going live.
Well, definitely, Lerato is in this court here behind me, Court 9F, where she's still with some of her family members and friends as well. They also really celebrated because if you look at things, she's the major victor here. She's able to walk away with everything that she deemed was hers in the first place, and she was also legally proclaimed to be the wife of Jaba. The only thing she did not get was the interdict, and of course, it's also not that much of an issue at this point because the judge does say that Lerato can attend the funeral, and that's also what the representative, Advocate Mahan of the Tsambo family, was saying, that they did not say Lerato should not come to the funeral. But of course, Lerato was also saying the fact that she was not involved in the preparations of the funeral. So those are some of the issues that took place. But of course, we saw her very emotional as she was declared the wife of Jaba, legally so. And we're just waiting to see if she'll talk to us after this, because she's still inside the court. And I guess now they're just deliberating a way forward. I guess the big question, however, here is, will she attend the funeral or not tomorrow?
All right, so Lopang, we're going to leave it there. Thanks very much indeed for that update. And we'll cross back to you again a bit later on, hoping that she will have said something. Thanks so much indeed. All right, that was our reporter Lopang Alamu speaking to us from court. And as you've heard, of course, the wife of HHP has been given legal status as the wife of the deceased, and all the rights that flow now go with her. But she will have to find a way to deal with the interdict which she had tried to place on the court because that's been denied. And so the funeral will take place in Mabatu tomorrow. And so we'll continue to watch that case for you, but just want to remind you that a little bit later on the program, we're going to be speaking to Mr. Matole Matsecha, who is a cultural expert. And you would have heard in the judgment, if you were watching, that the judge even said, look, cultural experts themselves disagree on when a person is married under customary law. So we're going to try and get a bit more clarity on